Hello and welcome to episode 38 of the Money Talks. A little experiment we started on June 4th of last year is now 38 episodes in, and we today have a very interesting character, somebody that has, been working with one of the top tech companies in the world, has worked in a home dining startup of his own, and now is working for one of the largest food companies in the world. And he's seen it, done it, and everywhere in between. So without further ado, I welcome Munaf Patel. Sorry, Munaf Kapadia. My bad. I don't know why I was also drinking maybe. Patel.
You'd be
But it's
surprised.
Munaf
You'd be surprised the number of times that happens.
But anyways, I think just letting you know that this slip of tongue will pretty much tell you a lot about the conversation that's about to happen. So, Munaf, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, AD. It's really exciting to be here.
We're super excited to have you on board. And as we discussed pre-episode, there is so much to discuss, so much to go over, Munaf, that I'm going to take maybe give you a minute to introduce yourself, and then we'll get into your journey. So please go ahead and let the audience know. I know everybody knows what TVK is, but I think the man behind TVK needs to be introduced.
Thanks. So, guys, I'm Munaf Kapadia. I like to call myself the self-designated chief eating officer at the Bohri kitchen. Like AD said, I have worn many hats. I like to think of myself as a salesman. So my career started with me selling chewing gum for Wrigley's. And then eventually I joined Google and I started selling advertising. And then I started the Bohri kitchen and I started selling samosas. And now I am at McDonald's selling burgers. So at some point or the other, I'm always selling something. And that's kind of my journey.
So, and Munaf, it all started out, you are a Bombay boy. I think you started out at Cathedral. You've lived in Colaba your entire life, from what I understand.
No. So I actually, we shifted to Colaba some 15 years back. Prior to that, we lived in Baikala. And I still remember those trips. So I used to go to school by bus, by public bus. And I used to be incredibly embarrassed to go to my hoity-toity school where everyone's coming in their fancy vehicles. So I would get off at this faraway bus stop so I could walk to school and no one would notice I'm coming by bus. Yeah, it's taken me quite some time to get over that insecurity and today deal with and realize that there are much larger things to actually think about.
It's interesting. I took a school bus too. I went to Cathedral just like you, and yeah, I had the school bus though, which used to come pick us up. And after that, you went to HR, then Narsi Monji. You did MBA in marketing, and then you picked up a job. At Google. At 2001, getting a job at Google in India that was the dream for anybody at the time coming out of college. How did you land the job?
So this is. It was 2011, all right? 2011, that's when I passed out. And I actually did not get a job at Google. I got a job at Wrigley's right after my MBA. That was the first job I got. And it was a phenomenal job. I was one of 4 management trainees. And they put us literally like in an amazing race kind of setup where they sent all of us to each corner of the country. And we were on a 3-month stint where I was placed with this amazing regional sales manager called Linga Raju, who's also got a mention in the book. And me and Linga Raju on his bike would go all around rural Mysore trying to convince various retailers to buy chewing gum. And we would incentivize them with free buckets. That was basically my 2 months in Mysore. And somewhere along that sort of stint, despite being like it was phenomenal money for a fresher, and this is my first job in life and it's already on the field and it's for such a it's like an MNC and the money is great, but for some reason I couldn't keep myself motivated. It was really awkward. There's something about selling chewing gum which just did not do it for me. And around that time, Google also came on campus. So Google came really late to campus, and I applied for that as well, even though I had a job, and I got that also. And the only difference was Google gave me a 40% pay cut. and I had to make a PowerPoint presentation to my father to convince him that I wasn't destroying my career before it had even begun.
Wow.
And that's it. And that's how I started my stint at Google.
So, being in the field at Wrigley's, and my first job also was in door-to-door sales or
Yeah.
being out in the field. Uh, how important was that experience when you think about now, 10 years later, right? How important was that 6-month experience? Because you mentioned that in the book, but
So I think it's phenomenally important, right? Like when I was in that MBA classroom for those 2 years, we would fantasize about what happens after MBA, especially those of us who are freshers.
hmm
And we would come up with these various fantasies. And FMCG management trainee was one of the biggest sort of goals that anyone had. Getting into an MNC, FMCG, in a management trainee role, it's literally one of the top sort of goals that you have post MBA. And I'm just really happy I did it, because once I did it, I realized it's not for me. So I enjoy sales, which is very evident from my career trajectory. But the product that I'm selling needs to mean something to me. And also the distribution channel to which I'm selling it needs to mean something to me. And in my case, it turns out I like selling things online
I see.
and not offline. And that discovery was only possible because of Wrigley's.
So what? And then your role at Google, you were an account strategist, right? What does that mean? What were you doing for Google?
So when I got the job at Google in Hyderabad, Hyderabad sort of it's an advanced KPO where
Okay.
you have these incredibly intelligent individuals, except for me, who've been hired by Google to support the Google client-facing teams in America and in the UK. So we were product experts who would support account managers or the actual guys who would talk to clients in America and the UK. So we would support Googlers. And that's how I became fairly decent when it came to online advertising via Google products. And somehow, through actually, that itself is a great story. In those 9 months, I managed to find a way to convince the management to give me a break. And they made an
Okay.
exception and they sent me to Bombay. So they said, okay,
Okay.
Munaf, do a rotation. So Google has this phenomenal concept called rotation. So it's like an internship within the organization. So very early on in my career, they allowed me to do a rotation in the Bombay office, which is a client-facing office. So the Bombay
Okay.
sales team works with actual clients and the Indian large customers of Google. And so I did a 3-month rotation with that team, and I managed to impress the team enough that they lobbied for me to get a full-time role in the Bombay office. And that's how
Interesting.
my real career started in Google, which was the 3 years I spent in the Bombay office.
You take a 40% pay cut. You join a company like Google, right? And like you said, you had to make a presentation very early. Like most people of your age were making presentations to VCs. You were making one to your father. Uh, but what were you trying to get out of that experience? Was there something that said, I'm willing to take a 40% pay cut for Google? Would you do the same thing if it was Microsoft, if it was someone else?
So, so I had this infatuation in my head, right? That Google is this company that where ideas are sort of propagated, and I mean, I just till date I'm in love with their concept of moonshots. Okay, it's something Larry and Sergey started, where the idea was that hey, it could be a 1% or 5% chance that this thing will succeed, but if it does, it will have a 10x impact. So it'll be a
Yeah.
moonshot. All of that just completely appealed to my personality. And I was like, I'm going to go to this company, I'll do whatever the job is. But ultimately, I'm going to give them such phenomenal ideas that, it will literally finally give me an opportunity to push my creative boundaries to their limit. I mean, when I was at Wrigley's, for crying out loud, they wanted me to be a area sales manager. So my job was to sell chewing gum. But after 3 months or after 2 months, I made a presentation on how they should be using Facebook to create an intranet where they should be motivating their regional sales managers by allowing them to, share comments. And I mean, so clearly I had a certain way, or I have a certain way of thinking, And I felt Google was the right place for that because of everything I'd read about it. And my first 3 months at Google were a massive wake-up call.
Okay. How so?
So imagine I've gone into this company, I've taken a 40% pay cut. Suddenly, from being one of 4 people at Wrigley's, I'm one of 400 people in the same position at Google India. But still, I'm still motivated. So in the first 2 months when they were training us, first month when they were training us, I would be the guy who would raise his hand all the time. And I immediately had a reputation as being the super enthusiastic cutlet who will do really well in this company because clearly he's motivated. He has something to prove. Um, and
Why cutlet, by the way?
Why not
They
samosa?
know your mother, huh? Like, yeah, they know your mother is a good cook.
It's actually possible. Maybe it's inside my head because of the Russian cutlets that we said.
Okay.
So everyone thought I was that guy, and I thought I was that guy to the extent that I would work. So I'm in the chillest office in the world, all right, with a gym, with a lunch service, with a cab service, with it's like a college campus in Hyderabad, and I'm working till 2 a.m. There's no one in office. Like I'm alone till 2 a.m. and I'm working in office. I was that guy because I wanted to prove something. I was sending ideas to Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and obviously no one was responding. I was telling them that, hey guys, you need to have an alarm on Google Maps. So when you reach your destination, your phone should ring. For some in my head, these were like earth-shattering ideas, and I was the guy who had to tell them about these ideas. My first appraisal in Google after 3 months, my first 3 months, was Munaf, if you don't get your act straight, we are going to have to let you go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I am the guy who everyone thinks is killing it. I am the guy who's working his ass off compared to other people. And I am the only one in my batch who was told that, Munaf, you've done phenomenally badly. The Excel sheets that we actually hired you to make, you're not making them well. And while we appreciate your enthusiasm and so on and so forth, you first need to do your core job. And once you get
True.
that out of the way, please do all of these other things. We love that about you, but first get your Excel sheets right. So that was my first sort of corporate lesson. And the good thing I did is I learned it fast. So within 6 months from that lesson, I gamed the system. I cracked it. I understood what I had to do. I understood what was expected from me. I overachieved to the extent that the organization then gave me an opportunity to further move. And when I finally went to Bombay and 1.5 years of actually selling directly to clients, I reached the stage in my career where it would barely take me half my work time to do my job that I was hired to do. So I started officially doing other projects in the company. So
Okay.
after 2 years of slogging, I had earned a place within Google where they would bless my efforts to create other projects. So I created something called Idea Factory, where we would aggregate ideas from Googlers. I created something called NGO Consultants, where we would Google volunteers would help NGOs with their online advertising, and that's kind of how my creativity kept on. It had an opportunity to grow.
4 years into Google, you're doing well. Things are going, on the right track. You've got a job that most people would give an arm and a leg for. And then you decided that, you know what, I think my journey at Google is interesting, but I'm going to do something even more interesting, which is I'm going to promote my mother's cooking, right? What was that? What was that moment? Why the sudden and massive shift?
So, first of all, I never even dreamt of quitting Google. That was never the intention. Very few people realize this. I wasn't that. So, typically, whenever I give talks in these colleges and so on and so forth, the audience will react in either of two ways. Okay, one part of the audience will be like, wow, Munaf, you're a hero. You did this courageous thing to empower your mother and take her food and put it on the world map, and you quit your dream job for it. And the second part of the audience will be like, wow, this guy's incredibly stupid to pursue something he knows nothing about and give up a career in Google. He clearly took it for granted. The reality is it's neither of the two. Okay, what simply happened is one fine day, my super boss, Vikas Agnihotri, who is one of our biggest endorsers of the book, he one day called me in one of the meeting rooms and he said, Munaf, sit down. And what's up? What's happening in life? What are you planning on doing? what are your career goals? And I told him, because like you already know, I'm now, like, I feel that I've exhausted my time in Bombay, Google Bombay. Now I want to go abroad, and I want to see what else is out there in the Google universe. I don't want to leave Google at all. I love the company, but I need something else to do. And that was my career plan. And then Vikas surprised me by asking me, but what about the Bohri kitchen? And I was like, wait, what? You've heard of it? He's like, yeah, I randomly read an article about TBK in the Jetwings magazine, when Jet Airways was still
Yeah.
around. And I was like, okay, wow, all right. And then he said that, but Munaf, aren't you worried that if you go abroad, TBK will have to wrap up? And I'm like, yeah, so big deal. Like, it's just a fun thing I'm doing with my parents. And he said that, but you do realize what you've created, right? It's not easy to get the press coverage that you've got and to create the curiosity that you've created. And then he gave me this really cool philosophy that I apply till date, and I literally narrate it to everyone and anyone who will listen to me. He taught me about the 5-year lens. All right, so he said that, Munaf, you can either look at life from a 1-year lens or a 5-year lens. Okay, a 1-year lens means that you quit Google today, and 1 year later, you come back. You decide that the Bohri kitchen has not worked; it's a complete failure. 1 year later, you get a job again. Either you get a job at Google or you get a job at Facebook or wherever else. In a 5-year time frame, you would have forgotten that you actually gave up 1 year of your life, because that's how things average out. Especially if you're a hardworking guy, because you pace up, it automatically averages out, and you get back to the career graph that you were supposed to be. The 1 year gap does nothing to your life. But now imagine that 1 year later you don't come back, you stay at the Bohri kitchen. 2 years later you stay, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years you manage to stay at TBK. What that will do for your life in terms of experience, in terms of confidence, in terms of opportunities, will be priceless. And if and when you decide to come back into the career sort of and into the corporate world after that, you will come back with a very different sort of bent of mind than you have today. And that just made too much sense to me. Yeah. And also it helped that the calculated risk I was taking, I could take it because I did not have any significant financial liabilities at that stage in my life. So everything clicked. The only box left is, do I have the courage to do it? Do I have the courage to face my parents? Do I have the courage to face myself and actually take this radical decision, which everyone will stare at me, when I take it. And I just did it. I kind of ripped the Band-Aid.
So tell us a little bit about ripping that Band-Aid, because that's exactly what the concept of the show is, right? To get a little bit deeper into it. Now, you've got this and amazing advice, by the way. I mean, I would love to meet your boss one day, because I think that was significant advice. The 5-year lens makes a lot of sense. And obviously the experience you did have, and interesting, it was 5 years, right, before you took up McDonald's.
Exactly,
but yeah, it's serendipitous, right, in a way. But you decide to leave, and you now want to go work on this fledgling but growing brand, which is TBK. And so tell us a little bit about what is TBK, how did it start, and because I know the story. I know the story when you go to have a meal at home, but it's going to be a while before somebody else can come and listen to it. But what's the story that behind starting the brand?
So again, not too many people know this, but the Bohri kitchen started simply because I had a fight with my mom. All right, one fine day I was sitting at home watching TV. She came in, she changed the channel. It led to an argument, and ultimately it led to an idea which both of us liked, which is, how can we work together to create something which she will enjoy doing, and which will basically give me more time with the TV. And we decided that she's a phenomenal cook, and we have access to cuisine which not many other people have access to, and I can experiment with my social media prowess, which was zero at that point in time. And then let's see where that takes us. And it was a fun idea. Call 5 people home on a Saturday, Sunday, see if they're willing to pay 500 rupees, and just see how it goes. Lie to my father for a month, and just do it.
Lie to your father how? Not telling him why people were coming home?
So when we first just bounced the idea across my dad, he said no. He said, what's wrong with you? You call how many ever people you want, I don't mind. But don't charge them money. to eat food at your house, which did not work for me. Not because that money meant anything, but more than the income, what it meant is someone's willing to pay, and that was
Correct.
critical to the idea itself, that we wanted someone to value a mother's cooking and an experience at the Bohri kitchen. That was half of the idea. So I had to lie to my dad for the first month. When anyone came home, I told him these are my friends, and it just worked out somehow. So that was great, and that's how it started. And then I just kept on having fun with it. So I had no social life at that time. So my Saturdays, Sundays were completely invested in this. I would experiment with different communication, with different copies. I would spam people shamelessly. I would call up random people, and before you knew it, my sense of humor and the way I was projecting the Bohri Kitchen as a brand, it went viral. We really managed to find a beautiful way to amplify word of mouth through social media, and my mother's cooking and my father's role in facilitating that cooking. It all just came together into this magical thing, which is our home dining experience. And that's how it went viral. And 4 months, 5 months of crazy visibility initially. And that's around the time in August 2015 that I took this plunge to quit. Now, what too many people don't know is the idea I actually wanted to scale up was not the Bohri kitchen. It was something called the dining table. So I had
Okay.
this thing that, hey, okay, cool. So TBK is happening at home. But what if we do 100 such TBKs? All right. So what if we identify another 100 families across 100 cuisines and communities, and you create the Airbnb of home dining experiences?
I
So
actually
it was a
remember
tech
this
idea.
pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a tech idea, and that came more naturally to me than selling samosas. So I made a deck on it. I literally I did some competitor research. I studied the industry. I looked at other people who raised funds. There were some interesting Indian startups that attempted this but failed. I found a Chinese startup that was thriving, and I hired a Chinese translator, a Mandarin translator, to convert that entire app into English for me so I could understand it and replicate it. And I put in some of my own money, and I actually made a UI, UX framework. And I was actually starting development for that. And then one fine day, and I also created a community of home chefs called Home Chef Revolution. So I already had 25 of the best home chefs in the city who saw me as a beacon of empowerment, and I was trying to enable them into a home dining experience. Bihari food, Pathare Prabhu food, fantastic Assamese food, Bengali
Hmm.
food, so on and so forth. And then one fine day, it occurred to me that shouldn't I do a dipstick? Shouldn't I find out whether people will actually use this app? Because I
Correct.
was so caught up in the popularity of the Bohri kitchen, I'm like, this will work. And I called up 50 people, and 45 said no.
Wow.
And I asked them why. All of these 50 people were customers of TBK. So I asked them that, guys, you're willing to come to my house, but why not someone else's? And they said that, Munaf, it's incredibly awkward to go to somebody's house to eat food and pay money for it. Okay, we come to the Bohri kitchen because you have phenomenal credibility. You have brand equity. My friends are talking about you. It's exotic. And it's not accessible. So all of that creates a lot of vibe. So if you randomly put another 24 home chefs who don't have all of that brand equity, we won't do it. In fact, it's incredibly difficult to convince me to come to another part of the city, to go to some auntie's house and then possibly not like the food and pay a premium for it.
Correct.
So the idea was definitely nowhere close to being where it needed to be for its time. And I wrapped it up, and around that time TBK was exploding, and it clearly had a phenomenal future ahead. And I said that, hey, let's do what's right under my nose. And I put more energy and effort out there, and eventually that led me to this journey that I've been on.
You were doing well, right? I mean, as a business, this was definitely flourishing. You had a lot of PR. You did not really have to spend money. People knew what the Bohri Kitchen was. It wasn't like you were trying to get on billboards and trying to explain what the Bohri Kitchen did. And yet you decided, later on, I think about, in 2016, or was it 2017, to raise some capital from venture capitalists who are all after growth, right? And may not really care much about profit, leaving out probably yours truly. But what was the reason for that? Like, did you what was the thought behind raising outside capital, bringing other people into this already amazing show?
So around 2016. So this is the chronology. 2015, August 2015, I quit my job. Okay, end of 2015, I finally decide that the only way to scale the Bohri kitchen is through delivery, and delivery
Hmm.
was all the rage at that time, and it still is. So I set up my first dark kitchen, and I struggle. So even though I go into 2016 thinking I've got this under control, I mean, I'm so famous. Everyone wants to order from us. How difficult can it be to standardize my mom's food? That I just need to hire some people, put them in the kitchen. My mother will train them, and voila! Suddenly, magically, this food will come out in delivery. And you've got Swiggy and Zomato that are delivering the food anyways for you. But 2016 was a hell show for me, where on one hand, our food delivery, the food in our delivery business wasn't good. So everyone was comparing it to the home dining experience, and it was nowhere close to being the amazing food my mother was making. And number two, I did not pay enough attention to the things I did not enjoy. So I did not enjoy accounting. I did not enjoy operations. So I stayed away from those things and I just kept on hoping that they'll figure themselves out. And I did the minimum I had to. And it led to a situation where, in the end of 2016, 1 year into this delivery business, I have a meeting with my CA. And he tells me, Munaf, your outstanding tax liability is equal to the money you have in the savings account. So I recommend that you pay it before it exceeds that amount. And I was like, what do you mean? So he's like, yeah, there's something called VAT. So even though it sounded like BAT at that time, but he said VAT. There's something called a value-added tax, which you haven't been paying. And I had no idea because I couldn't care less. And I had to pay it. And I was bankrupt for the very first time in my very early life. And I was like, okay, now it's time to quit. Okay, take Vikas's advice. 1 year later, you can get a job again. And 5 years later, none of this will matter. And I was literally on the verge of applying for a job when I get a call from the guys at Forbes. And they're like, Munaf, congratulations, you're doing so well. We are putting you on the cover of Forbes magazine. And I literally told those guys that I did something really stupid. I told them that, why are you putting me on the cover? My business is about to shut down. And they said what I like to call as the second philosophy, which has now, which feeds me and will feed me for the next few years of my life. They said that, Munaf, we are not acknowledging you because you're the founder of $1 million unicorn startup. We are acknowledging you because of the social capital that you've created. And we believe that if you keep on doing what you're doing, sooner or later, at some point in your life, you do something disruptive. And we want to call dibs on that. So along with the co-founders of Swiggy, along with Masaba, along with an Olympic athlete, a Bollywood actor, there was a samosa salesman on the cover of Forbes in March 2017. And the embarrassment of coming on the cover of that magazine was the reason I kept the Bohri Kitchen going in 2017. And I was like, hey, if I'm going to keep it going, let me try a different approach. So I learned how to make my mom's biryani. I said, let's do the things I would never do. So I learned how to make my mom's biryani, and I did this blind tasting where I told everyone it's mom's biryani, and they loved it. And I had made the chicken dum biryani. I learned. I did a crash course. I did a 2 month crash course in accounts, and suddenly my P&L started making sense. And by the mid of 2017, lo behold, we are profitable, and we are getting a decent 4 out of 5 on our food. So things were falling into place. And around that time, Bollywood also adopted us. So the press coverage went crazy. Forbes. So again, the press coverage went crazy. And I said that, hey, now it's time to take it to the next step. Okay, now I'm ready to go through the entire fundraising journey and see where I can take TBK. I'm done with, just playing along just doing things one step at a time. And that's when I started talking to a few people. I spoke to Apurv from Venture Catalyst, who I had already known for a year. I spoke to some acquaintances in the industry like Riaz, Rahul Akhirkar, Romil, etc. And everyone was open to the idea of actually funding it. So I said, why not? And Mihir Mehta played a very important role because I had no idea how any of this worked. So Mihir, who's an ex-Googler, and then eventually is now a co-director at the Bohri Kitchen, he came on board and he helped me and he guided me through that entire process.
Wow, and what a journey it was, right? You've been top 10 on TripAdvisor, achieved recognition as the best Bohri food restaurant by Times Food Guide, Forbes 30 under 30, top 50 food influencers in the country. You were part of the NRII for a bit as well. And everything seemed to be going well for the Bohri kitchen, but was it actually going the way you wanted? Maybe this is your time to tell us what was going on.
So, um, so basically, I was going through this journey where I had a brand. So actually, Ranveer Brar put it really well, and it's a chapter in the book called "When Ranveer Brar Compared the Bohri Kitchen to a Bicycle." So he compared us to a bicycle, and he said that Munaf, you have two pedals. All right, pedal one is your branding, PR, storytelling pedal. Okay, which is on overdrive. It's on a gear which doesn't exist. And then the second pedal is your operations pedal. Okay, it's your production pedal, it's your distribution pedal. That's barely on gear two right now. So, and what happens to a bicycle when both pedals, like there's no such thing as a bicycle, which has two pedals which are moving at a different pace because the bicycle won't move. So that's kind of what was happening with the Bohri kitchen. That how much ever press coverage I was getting, it wasn't taking me anywhere that I really wanted it to take me. It was definitely not taking me anywhere which justified quitting Google for. So I really pushed myself to think that, hey, how do you scale up something like this? And I came up with a reasonable hypothesis, which is, hey, look, I can only have so many people coming to my house.
True.
And I definitely don't have the risk appetite. And neither do I believe in the business model of a restaurant. This delivery thing makes sense to me. Okay, it's sort of like Uberizing food, the dark kitchen concept, low on assets, low on overheads. And you're building a virtual brand and a virtual story, which the Bohri kitchen by definition was. So I said, hey, let's capitalize on that. Let's take this food and whatever we can in the experience of it at scale to people. So while we cater to, let's say, 1% of our customer base through home dining, let's cater to the balance 99% through delivery. And even in delivery, the idea wasn't just to sell biryani. It was to take the thal, make it into its compact form called the thal in a box, and basically do a
Mm-hmm.
meal box concept, which people, so they would be able to come on my website and choose the kharas, the savory item, the
Yeah.
meethas, the sweet dish, the jaman, the main course, the condiments. It'd be a gamified experience for 250, 350 rupees, and boom, that was the vision for my delivery business. Um, Now, I knew nothing about delivery. I knew nothing about how hard it is to run a dark kitchen, the unit economics behind it, the supply chain, XYZ. So 2017, while I learned how to set up one little delivery kitchen and take it to 8 lakhs a month and profitable, 2018, when I raised funds, it was raised on the backdrop of, hey, I'm going to scale this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to go from 8 lakhs to at least 50 lakhs a month. I built my entire plan on what I knew over the course of 2017. But by the end of 2018, I had to completely relearn how one scales up a dark kitchen business. For starters, you can't make food fresh. Okay,
Yep.
it was a huge learning experience for me. That you can't possibly run a fresh food kitchen at scale in an on-demand business where you're trying to squeeze out 5 to 10% margins per order. It's impossible. So that itself was like an insane learning experience where I started basically interviewing. I don't know if it's ethical, but I interviewed chefs from Domino's, from Rebel, from various other food delivery businesses that were doing really well. And I would interview them, and in the process of the interview, I'd learn that, hey, how are you guys actually doing this? And I very quickly learned how it worked. Okay, that there are three different models. Okay, the one which made sense for me was sort of a hub and spoke model. Okay, there are different kind of food technologies that you can use. You can go retort, you can go frozen, or you can go XYZ. And then identify the vendors who supply to the biggest food businesses out there, and I shamelessly went to them and I said, look, I run the Bohri kitchen, I do 8 lakhs a month, but I'm on the cover of Forbes. Do you want to be part of the story? And they all said yes. And they all said, okay, Munaf, for a year and a half, we'll support you. Let's see where this goes. And literally in those 6 to 9 months, it must have been one of the most difficult periods in my life for me, because I'm learning something which did not come naturally to me, operations. But I learned it with the help of everyone around me. And I literally did a mini PhD in how to set up a dark kitchen at scale, and while learning, I set it up, which is also one of the reasons why we burnt our hands quite a bit. Like, for example, a lot of people ask me, Munaf, is there one regret you have? One thing you would change if you could go back in time. I would change nothing but one thing, which is I wish I had spent more on my first kitchen. Okay, that was the
Spent in
single
what
biggest
way?
mistake I made. So when I raised funds, Ari, I was a first time, founder who raised money for the very first time in his life. And the way I've been raised, I can't spend money. I'm frugal. So even though this was investor money, it was angel, seed funding with a very clear objective of spending it fast and, scaling your business. For me, it was like my father's money. And the minute I got it, I was like, hey, should I be putting it in a fixed deposit? That was like the first thought in my head. So when I started setting up the first kitchen, I was doing stupid things like trying to find secondhand equipment. When I should have gone for a kitchen that cost me $1 lakh a month, I was settling for a kitchen which cost me 50,000 rupees a month. And all of that led to a very weak foundation for my delivery business, and that massively slowed down our entire growth path. So those 6 months were brought down to 2 months, and in those 2 months, if I set up a 1 lakh rupee a month kitchen, it would have had a significant ramification on everything that happened after that, in terms of the way the business was built. So that's the one thing I would change if I had to change anything. And that might have led to a situation where around the time we went broke again, in 2020, I might have been profitable if I had sorted out some of those foundational things.
So 5 years later, I remember the email in 2020, and I know it must have been a very difficult one for you to write. You would love to understand what happened, and then there was a renaissance. I think that's a very important. We talked about this pre-episode, that I think this is going to be the most important takeaway, which is the hard stop, the renaissance, and what's happening and what you've learned from that. Maybe you could just take us through that, and then we'll talk about a little bit about your book as well.
So around March 2022, very big things happened in my life. All right, first of all, the pandemic hit us, the lockdown hit us, and it was a body blow for me and the business. And why was it a body blow? Because in the first 2 months, there was a lot of uncertainty around COVID, around even food delivery. Does the virus spread with packaging? Stuff like that. In fact, there were these horror stories where a couple of kitchens, they detected COVID in one of the boys, and they had to make a public announcement. So whoever got that food, would get tested. It was that crazy at that point in time. And worse than that, I was just really scared for my boys, okay, for my staff, for my team. So I said that no, just go home, because at that time there was that migrants exodus happening. So I was like, please go home, stay with your family, stay safe. What I did not anticipate is that lockdown would last for more than 2 weeks. Okay, forget 2 weeks. It's technically a year now that we're in the same situation. And this was at a time when, from a P&L or a balance sheet point of view, I have started setting up my 6th outlet. So I was in hyper expansion mode. I had completed my 4th and 5th outlet. They were 2 months old. They were bleeding money, obviously. They would break even after 6 months. And I was setting up my 6th outlet already in Chamber. And I was confident that, hey, I'm going to raise a second round of funding. Worst case scenario, I'll raise a bridge round. But I'll keep it going. And even the second round of funding, the people who said no to us did not say no. They just said that take it to 50 lakhs a month. We were at 35 lakhs in December. So it was very, well within reach. Take it to 50 lakhs and we'll figure it out. And for me, the compromise wasn't not taking the money. It was that I couldn't take 5 crores at the valuation I wanted at that stage. I had to take 1 crore as a bridge at a valuation which I wasn't happy with. That was the compromise. It was never about, hey, I wouldn't get money and I would have to shut the business down. But when that happened, when the bridge did not come in, the pandemic hit me and I was bleeding because I had 3 outlets. I had 2 new outlets and 1 outlet under construction. I just couldn't handle it. And at the same time, I sent my boys home. So for 2 months, I was out. My business was off. And I was paying rent. I was paying everything. and I just couldn't do it. I was running on fumes, and I said, okay, now I give up. And I had so in the book I write about panic attacks. I had one of the worst moments in my life in terms of stress. The good thing, so I said two important things happened, right? One was this. Second is I got married.
Yeah.
Right. So March 15th, March 20th. Okay, so March 20th the lockdown hit us. March 15th I got married. Um, and and that saved me literally. So Zabia Kadir, who's the one running our kitchen and literally is the single guy running the entire business today. They came and they told me after 1-2 months of me recovering that Munaf, maybe this is an opportunity. All right, that now you don't have funds, so you can't even tell your investors, that what are you going to do about it? You can't scale the business anymore. You can't chase valuation anymore. You can't tell yourself that you can chase valuations and the next round of funding anymore. So just go back to your roots. Okay, do what you always enjoy doing. Run a smaller business, but something that's more authentic to what TBK is. And it's taken us a lot of time to get here. So it's only been 3 months since we've been back alive. And that too, I did it under the radar because I was just really scared of jinxing it. Um, and
What is the Renaissance? I mean, what is this redux that you're talking about?
So what we did is the delivery business in its original avatar was an on-demand delivery business built out of dark kitchens, where you could order within 45 minutes you would get your food depending on where you were in the city, and you could order on Zomato and Swiggy, and you could order worth 250 rupees worth of a box of biryani. So my average order value used to be 400 rupees. At our peak in December, we were doing 200 orders per day, and my margins were like 5%, 7% on an order. Today, after 3 months of just launching our pilot, we've gone back to our original dark kitchen, our small little kitchen that we have. And we are not taking any on-demand orders anymore. We have one primitive
Very interesting.
phone number that we call the Samosa helpline. You can WhatsApp that number or call that number. My super charismatic phone receiver called Trevor will answer the phone, and he will take your order. And we have a minimum order value depending on where you are. We deliver the food ourselves. We have a massive menu. So in the previous delivery business, I had a limited menu because everything was constrained by supply chain, shelf life, storage. Now we make it patiently. You give us a day's notice at least. In fact, in the last 2 days, we've needed 2 to 3 days notice because we are backed up on orders. So the team actually gets to express its creativity. Kadir, for the first time, gets to enjoy himself because he's like, cool, I will make this for you. He gets to say that to a customer. The only rule is we will not make Chinese food. We will only make Bohri food. That's the only condition. And it's immediately led to results. Like we are profitable, 15-18% margins per sale. And what's worked for us, I think, really well is this hits our target audience where it exists, where it actually exists. So
we talked
in the
about
previous
this
delivery
yesterday.
business, in the previous delivery model, I was creating a target audience that we never had. Out here, I'm just going back to the guys who already knew about us and cared about us. So as long as, and that's the only condition I've given Kadir, I'm like, don't chase sales. Just make sure your rating is 4.5 plus. And track frequency and track retention. Track how many times is the guy ordering again within a month, and how many times does he come back to you in the next month. If you're getting these metrics right, sales will
Why
fall
did
into
you
place.
use those two metrics as the two KRAs to track?
So I'm basically asking him to track stickiness, right? So how do you track stickiness? How do you track customer feedback? One is you ask the customer for feedback. That's the easiest thing to do. And that KRA or KPI is 4.5 out of 5. Okay, currently we're trending at 4.5, which I think is phenomenal. The second way to track stickiness is, does the guy actually come back and order? Now, does he come back and order within the month? Or does he come back and order in the next month, or does he not come back and order? So in this case, I am still figuring out, are we the kind of brand where a customer comes back within the same month, or does he come back the next month? As long as we are either of the two, as long as the retention is 40%, which means 40% of the customers who ordered in the previous month are coming back.
Product market fit.
Which is great. And as long as we are like a 1.2 even, which means The guy ordered once in the month, and 20% ordered again in the same month. These are great metrics, and as long as you're doing this, that means you're doing it right, and customers will keep on coming back to you. And right now, the only goal I have is this, and being profitable. We'll do this for 6 months. We will have enough profits to move into a better kitchen. That's how we're taking it.
The next part of the show, it's going to be a quick 10 questions I'm going to ask you, and it's called the rapid fire round. Whatever first comes to mind, just go ahead and say it, blurt it out. And meanwhile, if there's any questions, I know we've not had any time for audience questions today, but if there's anybody who wants to ask any questions, we'll be happy to take them at the end if you have a couple of minutes. So, Munaf, are you ready? And not Patel, this time Kapadia. First question, and this is a very interesting question because you're in the business. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Donald Trump are coming for the Bohri kitchen dinner. What is the plan?
I'm not sure if I can say this, but the first thing that came in my head is to poison Donald Trump. Yeah.
We've had that reaction from every single person. One thing that you know to be true, but very few people agree with you on this.
So a lot of people have told me that the Bohri kitchen is not scalable. Okay, at least outside Bombay, on account of it being the Bohri kitchen. So they feel it's too niche, naturally because of its cuisine. Whereas I am of the opinion that because of its nicheness, it has an opportunity to scale. And that conversation usually keeps it finds its way in some form or other with the different people that I speak.
So it's a very, very interesting and important conversation too. And so, like I was just saying, while we got you back on, is that some businesses aren't built to be scalable in the sense that people need to use it ever so often, right? Like we had Ramakant Sharma on the show for New Year, and his business is in interior fit outs. People are going to do interior fit outs once in 10 years, right? But to him, the way he tracks how well his business is doing with customers is to figure out how many people are actually referring to me, or how often am I getting recalled when people talk about interior fit outs. Very interesting conversation there. Next question. Let's see. What is the first name that comes to your mind when you hear the words successful entrepreneur?
Ambani.
Which one?
Dhirubhai.
Dhirubhai. Yeah. There we go. And why? Why do you call him the successful entrepreneur?
So, because he's clearly made an impact. All right. So it's not about whether I'm a fan or not a fan or anything on those lines. It's purely that he's clearly an entrepreneur in the sense that he's created something of value, and he's built a business, and he's managed to hire and impact a lot of lives, and he's created a product or a series of products and services which touch a lot of people. So he is the epitome of what an entrepreneur would be, in that sense.
And a true rags to riches story, right?
Yeah. If you came from nothing. So in this case, if you measure success by money, I would say Dhirubhai Ambani. Yeah.
Okay. When do you get your best work done? Morning or night?
Morning. Early morning.
Early morning. Okay. And who is your favorite superhero?
Spider-Man.
Why? Oh, that's a new one, by the way. Iron Man has been like the clear favorite, but why Spider-Man?
Huge Spider-Man fan. In fact, I'm playing the game on the PlayStation right now. I don't know why. I think it's because it's an underdog story. All right, it's about this. It's a young college kid who has a significant. So in fact, I've used the Spider-Man story in the book, where I've said that. So I've used it in the branding chapter to drive a point home that sometimes when you want to create an impactful story, so even though Spider-Man's a story about a radioactive spider that bites a human being, and the human being gets powers. Now you would think that's a powerful story, right? It's enough. Yeah. But what really makes the story powerful is what happens to his uncle. And his uncle dies trying to save somebody. I think it was a bank robbery or something. I don't recall. and he goes to his uncle, and his uncle leaves him some last words that with great power comes great responsibility. That relatability of that situation, like, I mean, imagine radioactive spider makes a human being super powerful, is not relatable, but the uncle aspect is super relatable. People bond, they think. So I literally use that as an analogy for the Bohri kitchen, where ultimately I was selling samosas and biryani, but what made it relatable were my parents and the home dining experience, and the sort of very personal life that I exposed to everyone. That's not the reason why I like Spider-Man, but I thought I would share that.
And you're always a great storyteller. I think that's one of the key factors behind why TVK is as popular as it is. Let's see, one piece of advice to founders about fundraising.
Raise $1 million.
Raise $1 million. That's a really good one. Raise $1 million, you said, or rather raise enough for 2 years, depending upon your business model. Right? Good one. One thing you would like to change about the Indian startup ecosystem? You've been in it for 6 years.
I just wish it was more transparent.
In what way?
In the sense that, like, see, I don't know. I don't know what it's like abroad. Okay, I'm just, grass is greener, maybe, I'm not sure. But I would like to think it's a little more professional abroad. Out here, a lot of the stuff that happened for us happened very, it took me by surprise. Like for example, one of our investors backed out after 6 months. This is after I realized he hadn't signed the papers. I just assumed he had. It's all very, it's almost like, while I am this fancy guy who's raised funds and built a private limited company and so on and so forth, but ultimately half of what I was doing is what my father does with his business as a wholesaler, selling plastic goods, and the struggle he has to go through. So that kind of never made sense to me. And today, when I talk to other founders or entrepreneurs, I tell them, try your best to do it with a co-founder. So one of you can focus on fundraising, because it needs, unfortunately, that kind of effort and energy.
And more so in India. I mean, without talking about the ecosystem, Munaf, I would say that it's because it's so difficult. India doesn't have the safe. It doesn't. I mean, I know Sanjay is working very hard on this at 100x, but it's still not a very clear document, right, of how to raise a round without having to do all the hassles that we currently have to do as a VC to be able to get shares in our name, right? And you're absolutely right. The process is so long and it's so complicated, right? Despite the government doing everything it can to make it simple, it probably need at least one guy working on it for 6 months non-stop to make it go through, which is a lot of effort. So I completely agree with you on this one. We have to find a way to make it easier.
So with me here, we had this discussion sometime back. I was like, I mean, it's ultimately money which is being put behind a certain set of variables. So there has to be a science to it. Why is there so much human involvement? Like, you should either give a yes or a no to an entrepreneur basis his numbers and basis his industry and basis what he brings on the table. And obviously there's a subjective component, but there should be a number attached to that as well. Why is this so dynamic? I haven't understood that till date.
2 things that you would put on your bucket list. What are the 2 things that are on your bucket list? My bad, I read that wrong.
I mean, it's really weird, okay, and it's embarrassing, but like, this wasn't on my bucket list until COVID happened. But now, just like a lot of my travel plans are on my bucket list. Because I don't remember what it's like to travel. Like, Zabe and I are just literally depressed because of the plans we had to see the world. Because imagine, right, AD, I finally let go of my 5-year entrepreneurial venture, and unfortunately she was part of it for 2 years. So for those first 2 years of our life, when we got to know each other, I was an entrepreneur who just worked my ass off without a holiday in a week, because I used to work 7 days a week. And finally that's possible, and now COVID's happened. So I mean, it's not on my bucket list, obviously, but I would say that it's one of the things I'm really looking forward to. Something on my bucket list for sure is, so very long back, I'd done a cycling expedition, where I cycled up the Jalori Pass I'd cycle up to the Jaluri Pass. So it's basically it's a couple of thousand feet above sea level. Yeah, I think it's 10,000 feet above sea level or something like that, and it's on the base of the Himalayas. And on a whim, a friend of mine, a Googler friend from Hyderabad, he just took me there, Gaurav Shinde, who's also in the book. And the reason I went there is I did not know how to cycle. So I have this weird fantasy in my head that I've learned how to cycle in one of the most toughest situations, possible. And I did, and I made a fool of myself. And I was the last guy who always made it to camp after every day's worth of cycling. But I want to go back there to just remind myself that I was that guy, and I think it'll be really good for me. So that's on my
Very
list.
interesting. Very interesting, and I really hope that you do that as very soon after this whole lockdown situation is over. Last three questions. Let's see. One piece of advice you would give your 18-year-old self.
Don't be afraid of failure at all, like not even slightly. I mean,
and that's a very
honestly, AD, it depends on how much financial security I leave him, because I don't plan on leaving him any financial security. But if I do, I would tell him, don't be afraid of failure.
Let's see. The worst piece of advice you have ever received. You don't have to name the person, so you can.
No. Okay. So one of the worst pieces of advice I've ever received is that, Munaf, you should go and do things that make you uncomfortable. All right.
Okay.
I disagree with that, in the sense that, like, I'll give you an example. Okay, I spent 3 months of my entrepreneurial life trying to convince a BMC officer to give me a license.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kadir went to the guy, and in one day he got it done. So there's some things which you're good for, and then there's some things which you're not. All right. It's very important in life, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur or anything you do really in life, that you focus on what you're good at. Yes, there is something called learning, and you learn, things which you're not good at, and so on and so forth. But understand the opportunity cost of that, right? If at that point in time in your life, there is a lot more you need to do which you're actually good at, outsource everything else.
Makes sense.
So
that's very, very, very good advice, actually, I would say, because you have to operate in your areas of excellence, right? Then trying to operate in areas that you're not that are outside your scope. Again, you learn, but you can't bet your business on your learning, right? So that's a very, very good one.
Spend 15 days figuring it out, but if you're still not able to do it, please quickly tell somebody else to do it.
Yeah, or maybe get the other person to do it. You learn from it. Maybe next time you try it out, right? Before. So
I'm never going to be a BMC officer and getting a license.
So thank you so much, Munaf. Any last thoughts you would like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, so one thing which is, I really I've been trying to propagate this, that entrepreneurship doesn't have to mean you've started your own business. It can be, it's I think it's more a state of mind. So as long as you are exhibiting the qualities of an entrepreneur, which means you're trying to, you're going over and above what you're supposed to do. You are incredibly persistent or perseverant. You are thinking outside the box. You are giving it everything and anything, and you're not limiting yourself by any sort of, preconceived notions. You're being an entrepreneur. So you could be a college student, you could be working at McDonald's or just any other job, or you could have started your own business, but you're still being an entrepreneur, and you benefit from everything it means to be an entrepreneur by doing that. So don't think that this sexy life of an entrepreneur is something that you can only get by giving up everything and starting a venture.
Great piece of advice. I think you can become. There are many ways to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't really always have to be with the tag of founder to go with it. So thank you so much, Munaf. I mean, really enjoyed the conversation, and looking forward maybe in the next 6 to 8 months with the Bohri Kitchen reviving, that we'll have another chance to have you on board and discuss the progress. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, I hope so.
Everybody, thank you so much. Great session, and we'll see you all again next week. Have a good night.
Cheers. Good night.
Cheers. Bye.